Okay, guess I'm talking about the Tsundere controversy. Hello, my lovely friends. A few days ago on Twitter, there was an eruption of hate and anger and confusion and indignation about the use of the word tsundere. Well, it wasn't so much about the word tsundere itself, but how the word was translated or localized in the game. Now, side note, my first encounter with the word tsundere was in around, I think, the year 2003. I was translating a song that was in an anime, and that term came up, and I was so confused. I had no idea what that word was, and the internet was not as advanced as it is now, so it was a lot harder for me to look it up. I don't really remember what I did. I don't remember what I translated at the time. I think I just kind of fudged it. Thankfully, it was for a fan translation, not a professional one like I do now, so I guess it didn't matter as much. But yeah, I didn't know what it was until much later in my translating life. You know, probably by like 2008 or so, I finally was able to look it up on the Japanese internet and find out what it actually is. So what was this controversy exactly? In the visual novel Fata Morgana, Fata Morgana, I don't know, I'm not into it. Anyway, however it's pronounced, Fata Morgana, the word tsundere was translated as fragile male ego, and Weeb Twitter exploded with a bunch of armchair experts saying, oh my god, how dare they translate it as fragile male ego. It doesn't mean that. Oh, they're pushing an SJW feminist agenda. Oh, we all know what tsundere means. It should have just been kept as tsundere. And then the translating and localization community pushed back and, explained and defended. The game company themselves even, the game developers themselves even stepped in and said, hey, yeah, we sanctioned this. We were cool with this. The translator came forward and wrote a long thread explaining the choice and that it was much deliberated upon. It wasn't this I'm just gonna throw this translation in here just for kicks. But in spite of that, I still think that the other side wasn't exactly convinced. And a lot of the anger is coming from, frankly, just a misinformed place. And so before I get to my analysis of what tsundere means and how it can be translated, I just wanted to clear up a few things. All right, so the first point is I used to agree with the dissenters. I used to agree with the people who are angry that tsundere was translated as fragile male ego. Back when I was a young weeb and I had not even a year of high school Japanese under my belt, but I knew a lot of Japanese words. I was super, super into anime. I was really passionate and obsessed and excited about the series that I was into. I loved the characters. I wanted to just digest every little nugget of information I possibly could about the characters. I'd look at all their translated character profiles on their CD singles and character books, in the manga, Fushigi Yugi in particular. I was I want to get every little bit of information possible about this series, about the characters. I want to know it all. And I started noticing as I was watching the fan subs of it by Tomodachi Anime that some words I just noticed. I'd hear a word translated one way, and then in a different episode it was translated a different way. Same word, different translations. And I thought, well, that's weird. And sometimes I'd notice little typos here and there as well. That's fan subs for you. And one thing that I really noticed, because I was a teenager, was the swearing was often translated differently. Like the word aho was sometimes translated as moron, it was sometimes translated as jack, it was sometimes translated as dumb shit, sometimes translated as stupid. And I was like, well, that's just, something's fishy. Someone's pulling the wool over my eyes here. And so I even wrote Tomodachi a long letter. And if you guys are watching, and Tomodachi, if you've mysteriously found this video, let me apologize for how incredibly rude I was. But anyway, I wrote them a long letter, detailing out all of the inconsistencies that I noticed in the translations and asking them, why did you do this? 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 And it was, it was mostly coming from a place of I just wanted answers. I was confused. But there was, I'm sure, just a twinge of smug arrogance to it that I understand basically is what I'm saying, because I used to be that. I used to be those angry weebs on Twitter who are sounding off and suddenly becoming translation experts overnight. It's like, I understand what that feels like. So the second thing that I want everyone to understand is that the reason why I'm a translator, and this is true of so many people, I'd say the vast majority of people in this business, in the industry of translating visual novels, games, manga, anime, and the developers themselves, the reason we got into this business in the first place is because we love anime, we love games, we love manga. We were, and sometimes still are, just as obsessed with those mediums of entertainment as the fans are, and that's why we got into that industry. That's why I learned Japanese, because I didn't trust the translations that I was seeing. I didn't trust the inconsistencies, and I wanted to know all of those nuances firsthand. So I learned Japanese so that I could do that. So, you know, I didn't get into this business for the glory or the money. It doesn't actually pay that much anyway. And, you know, it's the same with most people that are in this industry. We're creative people who love storytelling, we love characters, and we love Japanese language and culture, and we love the medium of anime, games, visual novels, manga, etc. And along that note, the third point I want to bring up is that we genuinely do care about the fans. We genuinely want them to have a good experience. We care what they think, and we want them to like the product that we're translating, and not just from a capitalist standpoint of, well, we want to make money off of it, but like, you know, we're putting our hearts into these projects, and we actually want people to feel things from it. We want these stories to impact people and be part of their lives and to touch people the way they've touched us. We're not out here to like offend people or disappoint people or shatter people's dreams. And then the fourth point I want to bring up is we are human, though. We can and do make mistakes because we are human. And sometimes, as is the case with this Tsundere controversy, like, we'll go back and forth between ourselves and our own minds, and sometimes with our managers and the game developers, the anime developers, and we'll question back and forth, well, how should this be translated? What was this character really feeling in this scene? Like, we can get insider information like that, and we second guess ourselves all the time. And like, there have been plenty of translations that I've done where after the fact I'll look at it and be like, oh, I should have translated that thing that way instead. Too late, oh well. So we do make mistakes sometimes, and sometimes, you know, we have to choose between several choices, and we're not necessarily going to choose the best one for every single person that is a consumer of our product. And that segues into my fifth point, and it's that words have so many different nuances and meanings attached to them. And this is a point that you're just not going to understand very well unless you have learned another language other than English. But I'm going to attempt to illustrate that right now just using the English language. So consider the word big, okay? It's a word, it's a very simple word, it's a very innocent sounding word, it's big. But it has so many different nuances to it. So big can mean large, as in like, I got a big house, I live in a big house, this is a big cushion pillow, but it can mean other things. If I tell someone, oh, look who's a big boy, am I literally saying, look who's a humongous boy, look who's a large boy? No, I'm saying, look who's a mature, like a grown-up boy. Big in that instance is describing somebody's state of like, you know, maturing, growing up. If I say that something is a big deal, I'm not saying it's physically big or huge, I'm saying it's important. If I say something like, guys, this is big, am I saying, is it literally humongous? It's taking up a lot of space? No, I'm saying that something is significant in that case when I'm saying something is big. And if I say, oh, someday I'm gonna make it big, or, this movie is gonna be really big after it comes out, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be vast and huge and it's going to take up space. I'm mostly saying it's going to be famous, or it's going to be successful, or it's going to be popular. It's going to be like so as you can see, even the word big, an innocent word like big, it can mean so many different things. It can mean physically large, it can mean grown up, it can mean important, significant, famous, popular. It can take on all of these different little teeny tiny nuances. But just because big can take on the popular nuance when I'm saying, oh, this movie is going to be really big next year, that doesn't mean just because popular also also works. Oh, this movie's gonna be really popular next year. That doesn't mean that I can say, who's a popular boy, when I'm talking about somebody like growing up. That's completely false. That's completely wrong. It's kind of like playing a game of telephone. You're gonna eventually get really far away from the meaning. So that's one thing to remember, is it's the same with Japanese. Japanese words have so many different meanings as well as English words. So there never is going to be like one exact translation for each word, because the different nuances that the English word big has are different from the nuances that the Japanese word for big has, or the Japanese word for important has, or for the Japanese word for popular has. And on to point number 6, words originate from emotions, from sentiments that people want to express, and from intentions. Like when I say something, it's because I want to accomplish something with my words. And if you're telling a story with characters, you really have to take into consideration their emotions and their intentions behind the words that are coming out of their mouths. Which goes into point number 7, which is culture. Culture, culture, culture. Well, that's a hard word to say 3 times in a row. Anyway, yeah, culture. Certain words come into being in a certain language based off of their culture, and tsundere is such an example. It came into being from the Japanese language and from Japanese culture. So a lot of it is going to get lost in translation, so to speak. Think of topical, the word or the term, the slur, Karen. It originated in Western culture, it originated in like English language discourse. Karen, how would you translate that in Japanese? Something to think about. And point number 8, and this is a point that I kept seeing with the tsundere controversy, and I see it a lot in other things. It's like, well, why didn't you just keep it as tsundere? Like, otaku pretty much know what tsundere means. It's even kind of creeped into the mainstream a little bit. Most people kind of know what tsundere means. Why not just keep the word as tsundere? And the reason for that, in part, is because we've appropriated the word into our language and into our culture, and it kind of means slightly different things in English. Like English tsundere kind of means slightly different things than Japanese tsundere. So it's actually not a perfect translation. Tsundere is not a perfect translation of tsundere, is what I'm trying to say. And point number 9, and I'm gonna sound like an asshole for saying this, but you'll understand when you're older, or really, you'll understand when you understand Japanese. A lot of what I'm saying, if you don't understand Japanese, you simply just don't really have the ability to 100% grasp and comprehend everything that I'm saying. I don't mean that as an insult. I don't mean that to say, oh, you're just dumb. It's just you are lacking that perspective, and you need to understand that you are lacking that perspective, and that I and other people have a perspective that you currently do not have. You have the ability to gain that perspective. Again, if you learn Japanese, if you become fluent in it, to the point where you can consume all of this media without translations or subtitles and really understand it on a visceral level, like you hear something and it gives you the feels the same way English would, then you can understand our perception. But until you have reached that level, you cannot understand our perception 100%. We can understand where you're coming from because we've been there, but you can't quite understand where we are. So please understand that you don't understand.
Dude, I don't get it. I don't get it either. Wait a minute. That's it. I don't get it.
So now that I've probably pissed off half the internet, I'm gonna give you guys a definition of tsundere. I'm gonna actually break down what tsundere means, because that's part of the mission of my channel, debunking things and then also educating. So tsundere, I consulted Japanese Wikipedia because I think it's a good overview in general. Like if you want to know what something means, I often find myself on Japanese Wikipedia. And so I provided the link, by the way, to an article about the controversy in the game and to this Wikipedia article. So if you understand Japanese, you can check it out for yourself. But I have translated the entries for the definitions of tsundere from the Wikipedia article, and I'm going to read you my translations of the entries. So from Imidasu 2006, released November 2005 from Shuseisha. They're the same publishing company that does Ribbon Mascot Comics, by the way. Anyway, they say that, and so this was in 2005 that they said this. They say that tsundere is the act of being very dere. So I'm going to briefly explain what dere is. That itself is a term that means so many different things. It's kind of an onomatopoeia word, meaning like it's a sound effect-y kind of word. So dere, it means being love-struck, fawning. You could also say being affectionate or overly affectionate or needy or clingy. So it's kind of like all of those things. So the act of being very dere in front of the object of their desire when alone with them, in spite of having a tsun demeanor ordinarily. So now this tsun, what is this tsun? It's another sound effecty kind of word, onomatopoeia sort of word. So tsun, if you read a lot of manga in Japanese, you'll see oftentimes if a character like does a little humph away from another character, like if a character asks like, how are you doing today? And she responds, humph, you know, kind of like that. There will often be a tsun, like sound effect while she's doing the little huffy humph. So that's kind of what tsun is to an extent. It also can mean poking, like there's a lot of other things that tsun can mean. But basically, if you are tsun toshiteiru, like if you're performing tsun as a verb, it means that you're being standoffish, you're being aloof, you're being prim, proper, proud. It's that kind of thing. So it's kind of like, if you're looking at it with like girls and women in sort of cliche rom-coms, you'll often have, she was a strong, independent businesswoman and she had everything going for her until one day she met the love of her life. And it's that kind of back and forth. So tsun, like it doesn't have to necessarily be that you're like arrogant or haughty. It can also sort of have a connotation of being just a strong, independent, proud kind of person, and austere and very like, I'm not showing my emotions, I'm in control of everything. It can kind of have that vibe to it as well. And so you put those two things together, the tsun with the dere, and that's tsundere. But anyway, that's that definition from Imidasu, so that's kind of like the oldest source. So here's a definition from Gendai Yogo no Kiso Chishiki, 2007, released November 2006. And it defines tsundere as a type of heroine who is usually tsun-tsun, prim and proper, standoffish, aloof, a strong woman, but suddenly acts very docile and dere-dere, loving, needy, love-struck, etc., behind closed doors. Also used to describe such a disposition. So it's like, it can be used sort of like as a noun, like this person is a tsundere, but it can also be used to describe the disposition of, like it's a personality trait, or it's like the act of being tsundere, or as an adjective, it's like this person is tsundere, being tsundere is tsundere-ish. So as you can see, it's kind of a noun, adjective, and a verb kind of all at the same time, and it's also a concept. And it's also none of those things. So that definition was very similar to the last definition. They're focusing more on girls and women, and they're focusing on the strong exterior, but then behind closed doors, either like behind closed doors in private, but usually behind closed doors in private with the object of her desire. That's when she lets her emotions out. That's when she admits that she's needy. That's when she's vulnerable. That's another good word to use for dere, just being vulnerable and being emotional. And it's that sort of Jekyll Hyde thing going on. So another definition, this is from Chiezo, 2007, published November 2006 in Asahi Shinbunsha. So Asahi, that's like a very famous newspaper. So they say, tsundere is a word from otaku culture, which is slowly seeping into the mainstream. So this was like more than 10 years ago, it was starting to get into the mainstream from otaku culture. It describes a condition or person who is ordinarily prim and proper, aloof, etc., but under certain circumstances becomes needy, lovesick, etc. So in this one, it didn't specify like, well, when this person is alone with the object of their desire, that's when the dere comes out. It's more like, well, under certain circumstances, that's when the dere comes out. So maybe I'm tsun ordinarily around my senpai that I have a crush on, but then when this cheerleading chick comes over and starts talking to him, maybe that's when my dere comes out. Maybe I'll suddenly start like flirting with him or fawning over him because I feel threatened by this cheerleader chick showing up. So that could also be a trigger for someone switching from tsun mode to dere mode. And then here's another definition. This is from Da Vinci, February 2007 edition, released in January 2007 by Media Factory. Tsundere is when a woman, again, they're kind of focusing on females here, is when a woman has two warring sides to her personality. She has a tendency to act very needy and lovesick in front of her crush, so to overcompensate, she'll act very prim and standoffish. So this one I think really gets a little bit more towards the heart of what tsundere really is, and that makes sense because like when a term first originates, a lot of people are kind of a little unclear on what it is, but as it evolves and as it's used more often, then people get a richer understanding for what it actually is. So I think the main point of this definition is the overcompensating part. So it's like Like I mentioned earlier in the rom-com example, she was a strong, independent woman, but that's all a facade. Like inside, she's a weak, vulnerable little girl who just wants to be loved. Like that's kind of what tsundere is in this definition. It's more about the overcompensating part. It's really getting into the psychology of what it is to be a tsundere kind of person. It's a fear of rejection, a fear of being vulnerable, and it's having an ego. And then the next part underneath this is another like just blurb definition that the Wikipedia article had about it. So this is like a more current definition. Since it originated as internet slang, there are many definitions, none of which are fixed. I'm going to read that again. Since it originated as internet slang, there are many definitions, none of which are fixed. The interpretations are fluid and intuitive. Fluid and intuitive. The subdivisions and diffusions of its usage are starkly contrasted. Because of this, there is no definitive image of what tsundere is. No definitive image of what tsundere is. Examples of it are very broad, indiscriminate of sex or gender, humans or non-humans, relationships, happenings, etc. The moe factor that fans love is often visually depicted with cat ears and curly-Q hair. But as for tsundere, the biggest difference is that with girls, it's used to describe the metamorphosis of her attitude around a certain person. It's all about relationships. So yeah, a lot of this article didn't get into tsundere with boys, and indeed, tsundere is kind of more commonly a girl trope. But I see tsundere a lot in the stuff that I translate. For those of you who don't know, I primarily translate visual novels, but specifically otome games. And that's, if you don't know what otome games are, it's basically like a choose your own adventure. Like it's a light novel in game form, and every once in a while you get to make a choice of like what you do, and your choices affect basically how much your crush likes you as a result of your choices. It doesn't really alter the story, it just kind of alters like what kind of ending you get at the end of the story. And there's always going to be different routes, like it's the same story but like a different guy that you get to choose with each. It's a dating sim game. So, I'm gonna fall in love with this guy, then I'm gonna fall in love with this guy, but they're all separate stories. And there's always, like just like with a boy band, there's always the tsundere character, there's always like the soft nurturing type character, there's always like the badass character, there's always like the cute baby face kind of character. But yeah, there's pretty much always some kind of tsundere male character in the otome games that I translate, so I'm very familiar with the trope. And I've just found, in my experience as a translator for otome games, tsundere men, they can take on, like, the dark side of tsundere men. They can be downright abusive, like actually physically abusive, emotionally manipulative, verbally abusive to the object of their desire, and it's to overcompensate because they're really scared of being vulnerable, and because they're conditioned by society to, be strong men who never cry and who never show their emotions and who have their shit together, but maybe they don't necessarily feel that way. And so they act out. They overcompensate. Again, back to the overcompensating thing. They overcompensate by being very tsun, by being very proud, by being haughty, by being, in the case of tsundere men, often, and sometimes tsundere girls, like, I forget her name, I should remember it, but the main character from Oreimo, she's a very, like, abusive kind of tsundere character, where she's, like, downright abusive to her brother sometimes to overcompensate for the fact that she loves him. And it's kind of the same with tsundere men characters. In the otome games that I translate, they sometimes are just downright mean to overcompensate. So, what are they overcompensating for? Their fragile male egos, maybe? So you're all probably sitting on the edge of your seats wondering, so what is the actual best translation of tsundere? I've been sitting through this whole video so I could find out. Well, I'm gonna give you a list of a few ways in which tsundere can be translated. Now this will depend on the context of the story, the emotions of the character, the personality of the character's intentions when that character is using the word tsundere, And it also depends on the tone of the entire overall scene and what emotional catharsis we hope that the viewer is going to have from this scene. So here are just a few interpretations of tsundere. Jealous, hot cold, strong woman, emotionally constipated, puts up a front, wears a mask, secretly insecure, lovesick, dying inside, has intimacy issues, abusive, immature, emotionally unavailable, Miss Thang, awkward, moody, Elizabeth Bennet, repressed, unpredictable, and fragile male ego. Oh, that's long. Why are you so long?